The actions of our story begin with the fact that we are shown the hall in which the auction is being held. Perhaps someone will decide to buy such a tempting lot. Next, we are shown a young girl with white hair, who is a representative of the magical Lindelheit family. This lady's name is Carla, and she has never played a board game with other people, so she is incredibly valuable. It turns out that she was once a young lady from a prestigious magical family, but she was framed and accused of practicing dark magical arts, after which she was simply driven out of the family. Now you can get her on your team so that they can have a personal wizard. Everyone immediately started bidding because everyone wants to get such a magician on the team. The one in the guy in the hood thought that everyone was already offering 1,500 gold coins in order to get a magician on their team. But this was too small a price because her magical abilities are much stronger than those of ordinary wizards. He thought that their funds were too limited, so they did not offer a different price, but suddenly one of the audience raised a sign and raised the price to 10,000 gold coins. The judge realized that the bidding was going just fine, and for today's auction he could get quite a lot of money, but the girl was desperate because now she would have to be on a team with losers. The judge announced that this was the last chance to get such a strong magician on his team, but everyone started looking at each other because they didn't have that much money to raise the price. The man in the red jacket once again made an offer to increase the price, because the chance to get such a strong magician comes only once in a lifetime. But suddenly a sign with number 7 rises. He simply says with a smile that finally a brave man has appeared, and how much he wants to raise the price, but the guy suddenly names the price at 20,000 gold coins. Hearing such an amount, the man's face immediately changes because it is twice as much as the previous participant offered. And the guy in the hood just makes a satisfied face and says that he is going to buy such a powerful magician for 20,000 coins. At the same time, he says that he has the money with him, so he will pay right away and takes out a whole bag of gold coins. Of course, everyone around him immediately begins to whisper, because the guy offered an incredibly large amount, leaving no one else even the slightest chance to buy the magician. After this, the judge thinks that someone can offer more, and that rich Mr. Beast began to think to offer 22,000. But still, he does not dare to do this, so such a powerful magician was sold to the guy in the hood for 20,000, and the girl was clearly upset that now she would have to fight on a team as a magician. And the guy in the hood was clearly pleased with himself because he managed to buy out such a strong magician's partner for some measly 20,000 gold. It was clearly a profitable investment. The guy has already begun to come up with various tactics to ensure that all his enemies are destroyed, because with such a strong team member, it will not be difficult for him to destroy everyone. After which we are told that everything that just happened actually happened in a game called Hero and Academy, and our main character was an ordinary college student who had nothing else to do except play this damn game. But one fine day our boy went to bed after a long game, but to his surprise, when he woke up, he became a character from his game. But he ended up in the game several years before the original plot of the game began. The 20,000 that he paid to buy the magician Carla was simply an insignificant amount. 3 whole years have passed since our main character found himself in his damn game, and finally he waited for that very moment. After the auction, the boy went on stage and was glad that he received such a strong character. He thanked the guy for making him such a good deal. But the auctioneer decides to warn that the person he got on his team is an incredibly powerful magician, so it would be better if he just breaks the mana core. But the main character knows that Carla was a powerful magician. After that, they simply left the auction hall. The boy was told to take away the girl's magical powers because there was a seal on her neck that indicated that she was expelled from her family. This mark was simply impossible to remove, and with its help our main character could command his mage, so it was a very convenient ability. But with the help of her magical abilities, Carla could calmly destroy accurately and free herself from control, which is why, after purchasing such a magician, they are usually ordered to destroy the mana core. But our main character is not going to do this, and then decides to call up the panel with the information that the game gave him. The window completely shows all the information about him. It turns out his name is Yandel. He did not have any abilities, and he could not even use magic, which is why our main character decided to take a girl into his squad so that she would use her magical powers instead of him. It turns out that once the main character received a punishment, this punishment was that now he would never be able to use his powers. It was just a terrible punishment, because all his life he loved playing games specifically for magicians. But today this will come to an end because the girl was from the Lindelheit clan. She has a mana breathing technique. The main character can use her ability to begin to feel and use magical powers again. Returning home, the main character decides to introduce himself first and tells the blonde that his name is Yandel. In response, she says that her name is Carla. But suddenly the girl just starts crying because she doesn't want to be a magician on some terrible team. The main character found it very strange that the girl was so kind and just cried, because the last time he remembered her completely differently. When our boy played this game for the first time, the girl was in the form of the main villain who threatened to destroy everyone. But he moved to the time when the game takes place before the main events. Now she looks more like a poor, scared kitten, and not like the person who can destroy half the planet. After the conversation, they sit down at the table and start eating, but the main character notices something strange in the girl's behavior. She ate too quickly, as if she had not been fed for several days. After asking if the food was tasty, the girl was still distracted and looked at him in surprise. Carla asks him for forgiveness for completely forgetting table manners, but she really hasn't eaten for several days, which greatly surprises our boy. But she begins to say that until the moment the main character made her a member of his team, other people simply did not give her food. This was done so that the magicians did not have enough strength to escape. There was no reason, because the goal of those people was to completely break the will of the magicians to freedom. So they were kept in terrible conditions, not allowing them to restore mana. It was clear from the boy's face that he felt sorry for the girl. The sorceress makes a sweet expression on her face and says that she belongs to the family of the strongest wizards, which is why she had to not eat for such a long time. But after what was said, the main character could not even say a word. The girl was simply incredibly strong, so those freaks simply had no other choice but to take her food in order to take away her magical abilities. He begins to think about the fact that even so they could not completely take away her strength. That's why they forced her to starve. It turns out that Carla is a very strong girl. But there was one problem. Our main character wondered why the lady was so scared, and now that he knows the reason, he understands that such an attitude is simply unacceptable and asks the girl to eat as much as she can. Immediately clear that she has become incredibly happy. But suddenly the boy adds that in the future, she will no longer have such an opportunity. Of course, her face changes at that very second and she cannot understand what the main character really means. Is he really going to take her food away too? The boy begins to think that training by hunger sounds like a very funny thing, but Carla clearly did not like that the gentleman was making such terrible jokes and began to cry. While Yandel was only noticing her reaction to his words, it seemed to him that it would be interesting to see what would happen to this magician in the future. Perhaps he didn't pay 20,000 coins in vain. Suddenly she begins to become hysterical, and in tears she begins to ask for forgiveness from our main character. If he tells her where she made a mistake, she will definitely correct herself. But the girl asks him not to take her food anymore, of course. The boy was shocked by this behavior and said that he was just joking. It was better for her to get up from the floor because it was dirty, but the girl could not believe him, saying that he was deceiving. But he simply asks her not to worry, because if she follows his orders as the team captain, the girl will receive a lot of delicious food, after which he asks her to sit back at the table. Having made a terribly insidious expression on his face, the main character still admits that in fact he added the girl to his team in order to learn the mana breathing technique, which only her family knows. The lady was very surprised that the guy needed this technique, but he explained to her that he was going to study it before he entered the academy. Suddenly the girl warns him that in order to enter the academy, he must be under 30 years old. But the main character does not understand why she told him this. The boy still understands that she means the disguise in which he attended the auction. Now he understands why the girl was frightened by his every rustle. After which the main character still decides to show her his real face, which he had been hiding under the hood all this time, and the girl was shocked when she saw him. The main character looked like a typical member of the Korean youth group BTS, and here is his real appearance, just handsome. In such cases, Carla wants to find out how old he really is, and the main character, having said that he is 20 years old, thinks that he is at an excellent age to enter the Magic Academy. In such cases, the main character decides that he can finally take off his disguise in the form of a hood and finally begin to study the secret technique. It's immediately clear that the girl was happy because she was finally able to eat and was only too happy to help her master learn a new technique. She immediately begins to tell that the boy will need to collect mana from the air and accumulate it in his heart. But for some reason for the guy these words sounded like the incomprehensible ravings of a madman. After which she tries to explain that the main character must accumulate energy in his body, but he is tired of listening to these terribly boring lectures, so he goes into hand-to-hand combat. She couldn't understand why the hell he decided to start a battle, because he himself asked her to teach him techniques from her clan. But now our boy was interested in playing Monopoly, and since he got such a strong magician on his team, he finally had a worthy opponent. But it turns out that the girl simply hated the game of Monopoly. Because she had been told since childhood that it was a terrible game, she did not think that when she joined his team she would have to play board games. But the guy with purple hair just looks thoughtful and says that he never said in his life that they wouldn't play Monopoly. On the contrary, since the main character paid 20,000 gold coins for the magician, he will play Monopoly with her as if she were worthy enemy. She remembers that the main character promised that he would feed her various delicious dishes if she began to follow his orders as the captain of the team. Our boy does not go back on his words, and tomorrow he will prepare any tasty dish that Our Lady wants. Suddenly, the girl starts crying and says that she cannot believe that the guy turned out to be a real deceiver, because she believed him until the last. But the main character cannot understand why the hell this fool is crying. Of course, the boy didn't really want to use this ability, but it seems that he simply has no other choice, so he decides to use the mark that the girl had and orders her to stop crying. The mark on her neck activates and begins to glow red, but for some reason she doesn't stop crying. Where does she even have the strength to resist such force? Nevertheless, the girl still stops the hysteria. The main character makes a very serious expression on his face and says that the girl just did not carry out the order that her commander made. Doesn't she know what happens when the captain is not listened to? But judging by the girl's face, she was already scared. Carla wanted to start asking for forgiveness because she really was terribly sorry, but the main character decides that these will only be unnecessary words. He simply took the girl by the hand and asked her not to apologize because he perfectly understands her feelings and will not play Monopoly with her if she does not want it. At this moment, the main character looks like a real kitten. He is too cute. But for some reason, it seems to me that he is just pretending to be nice. He is trying to gain confidence and therefore says that he understands perfectly well that the girl is terribly scared. But Carla can't understand what the main character is trying to do, because all the time they took away her food if she didn't do her job, and the boy just took it and forgave her. She couldn't believe what was happening. The boy, of course, says that he forgives her, but she will still have to play Monopoly because it is his favorite game. While the girl was trying to get over the shock, the main character told her that he could play a board game with her using a tag, so it didn't matter to him. Realizing that she has no choice, she still agrees to one round of Monopoly. Although she didn't like this damn game, it's still much better than sitting without food. After they laid out the playing field, the main character thought that this was much better than playing against weak opponents, because he was a real genius of this game and simply could not use his real strength. Carla chooses the largest figurine that was ever in this game, and the main character is surprised by this because it was his favorite character for whom he won every round. After this, the time comes to start the first round of the board game, and the main character, like a real man, decides that the girl should make the first move and understand the rules of the game. The boy asks the girl to open her eyes because now it's time for the first round of Monopoly. After she opened her eyes, she saw that there were already dice in her palm, and there was no turning back. She'd have to play damn Monopoly. Women who were born with a lot of energy were able to play Monopoly very well. This is due to the fact that the amount of mana directly affects mental development. In this case, the amount of mana affects men somewhat differently. In simple words, their mental abilities reached a simply incredible level. Even their brains were simply enormous in size, and the girl was scared after our main character made his first move. Of course, she was scared because she would now be playing Monopoly with a man whose intelligence was many times greater than her own. But she couldn't even imagine that she could win. Carla was an excellent player who came up with many strategies, but the guy was on a completely different level. The main character noticed that the girl was terribly scared when she realized that he was smarter than her, and decided to support him by saying that Carla just needed to learn the rules better, and then she would be able to resist him, but she could not understand how she could defeat such a monster as him. Fear completely overwhelms her, and she asks her master for one small request, because until that moment she had never played Monopoly and only watched educational videos. So she asks the boy to help her figure out the rules of the game of Monopoly. And the main character just makes a thoughtful face and thinks that he, of course, can fulfill her request and help her figure out the rules. But why the hell should he be the person who will help her? Because that's not why he bought the strongest magician at auction for 20,000 gold coins. Suddenly, Carla begins to realize that she has done a stupid thing again, and immediately begins to ask for forgiveness from her master, but he again asks her to shut her mouth and not interfere with him playing Monopoly. But still, the boy turns out to be quite kind. Despite the fact that he spent a lot of money on the magician, he still agrees to fulfill her request, and before they start the game, the boy explains to her the rules. Some time passed and all the instructions were read. The boy asked if she understood the rules and tactics that can be applied in this game, but it seems that the gears in the girl's head were completely rusty, and she sat with the face of a stupid monkey. After which the main character decides to start the Monopoly game itself, Before the game, the girl must throw the dice in order to make her move. She will have to use all her luck because one unsuccessful throw can completely change the course of the game. After the first throw, the girl makes a rather strange move. But even here, one could read some kind of tactics, even though the main character thought that the girl was a much more talented Monopoly player, but he still expected more from her first throw. But he somehow didn't care about her ability to play, because the fact that she is now trying to play Monopoly as best as possible was already enough for him. I still can't understand whether the main character is a villain or a good guy, because it seems that he pretends. It was already dark, and there was absolutely nothing visible in the room, so the guy decides that it would be a great idea to light a couple of candles, so they can at least see the number of moves they get on the dice. Now, the game of Monopoly takes on a completely different situation, because now the main character is not going to restrain his real powers. From now on, he is going to use his strongest tactics to show the lady who is the real boss of the rocking chair. Until this moment, the boy was simply showing her how to play Monopoly correctly and wanted her to understand the main essence of the game. But now that she understood everything, he decides that he needs to use all his luck and intelligence to win. Only 2 moves passed, but even during this time, the boy managed to make sure that half of the lady's money ended up with him. She simply could not believe it and thought that now she would definitely lose to this damned idiot. But he was too smart. She began to complain that the boy was too strong a player and she could not defeat him in any way. But the main character began to make excuses because he thought that the faster the girl loses, the faster she will be able to accept her defeat. Suddenly, she even starts to cry because the taste of defeat was too terrible. She asked them to rest a little because her brain was already starting to boil from such a complex game of Monopoly. Why the hell did the guy turn out to be so smart? You can't say that he's a mad genius. At this point, the main character begins to realize that he has just made a huge mistake and will have to come up with something to continue the game. Despite the fact that she was on his team, the girl still had her own feelings, and he could not just defeat her and leave her cry. But suddenly he remembers about the mark that the girl had. The main character understands that with the help of it, he can give absolutely any order, and it will be carried out immediately. In this case, a simply ingenious plan comes to his mind, and he asks Carla to become a real master of Monopoly. Suddenly, the girl began to have a terrible headache. It is possible that her stupid brain still began to work, but it was just a terrible pain in her head. The main character calls himself a real genius who can make her a real master of the game of Monopoly. After the boy uses his technique, the girl turns into a real master of the game, but still she could not become as strong as the main character. But she could not understand what the hell happened to her brain. Had she really become smarter? Of course, the game continues, only now the main character fought with a difficult girl, and with a real genius who, like him, could now come up with various tactics that help her during the game of Monopoly. The guy with purple eyes noticed that the girl was simply unrecognizable. It seemed that the gears in her brain really began to move after that technique. Had he really just managed to create a real master of the game? But it still seemed to him that something was wrong with her, because the girl was playing too aggressively. At some point, he even decided to ask if she even understood that now they were just playing Monopoly. Still, the main character decides to reduce her self-confidence a little and reminds her that she is a member of his team. Now he will simply win her in Monopoly, after which she will teach him her family technique so that he can use mana. Still, he manages to return Carla back to Earth. But it seems that the girl is not offended by this at all, because she is grateful to our main character for saving her from a place where her food was constantly taken away. The boy paid as much as 20,000 gold coins for the magician, so she is just happy to sit and play Monopoly with him. Our boy can't believe what he sees because all this time the lady was like a villain from a game he was playing, but now he sees a very kind girl named Carla who wants to spend time with him playing Monopoly. But still, she understood perfectly well that the main character saved her from that terrible place, not because he wanted to do a good deed, but only because he needed her magical power to become a magician himself. Having said this, the girl even became a little cheerful because the main character was also not as strong as he wanted to seem. Until she teaches him a secret technique, he simply will not be able to enter the Magic Academy, which means that she also has value for him. But the guy with purple eyes is not the least bit angry at the girl, telling him that in fact he is really terribly weak. But despite this, he will definitely become stronger thanks to his new girlfriend. And yet Carla says that this is the reason why she was so happy when she played Monopoly with the main character. In fact, he was exactly the same weakling as her. But only together they could become stronger, after which she admits that she loves his. After which she asks that the main character be a real master of the game of Monopoly. Since he paid a lot of money for the strongest magician, she promises that she will carry out his orders because he is the captain of the team. Carla tells him thank you for pulling her out of a terrible place. She will never need food again and therefore says that she loves the main character and asks him to always take care of her. She liked being under his protection, but the boy simply couldn't understand why the lady had just admitted that she loved him, because he didn't do anything special. He just fed him dinner and played Monopoly. Apparently the girl has low demands for guys. In such cases, since the lady asked him to take care of her, he decides to make her a real master of the game of Monopoly. In such cases, since her brain is fully activated, he decides to give her training in board games. In this situation, the main character decides to make sure that the girl can be a real master, because he will not always be able to be next to her and protect her. In this case, Carla will have to be able to stand up for herself so that she is never offended. But for her, this training turns out to be very difficult, because the boy still continued to use the technique that speeds up the work of her brain. Despite this, the result was already noticeable, because the main character had to try so that the girl did not defeat him. She herself didn't know how long her brain could hold out in this state, because each new move was more and more difficult. She could not understand whether she could defeat the main character until her brain completely melted. But it's clear that the guy turns out to be much smarter than her, and even despite the fact that her brain worked much better than before, the guy still manages to find a gap in her defense and take a large amount of money from her. But she was not going to give up. She looked too tired. Carla no longer even thought about the fact that she could die from such accelerated brain work. She was simply trying to finish the game of Monopoly as quickly as possible so that the main character would remove the effect of this technique. But judging by the expression on the boy's face, it wasn't easy for him either, even though he was a strong player. But even so, he created a real master of the game of Monopoly, which he himself found it difficult to cope with. At this point, you can use the phrase that the student surpassed his teacher. After an incredibly long round, the guy with purple eyes still manages to win such a difficult round of Monopoly, but the lady did not understand what was happening to the guy. She simply couldn't understand what the main character meant at the end of the Monopoly game when he said that she was a worthy opponent. But the boy says that he said everything correctly because Carla really turned out to be a very strong player. She simply could not believe that she had just been praised, because all this time she lived in terrible conditions where everyone only scolded her. In which case she begins to cough and says that she wants them to play Monopoly again. From the girl's words, the main character was simply shocked, because Carla had just used all her strength just to try to win him, and now she asks them to play another round of Monopoly. Of course, he starts to get terribly angry, saying that he is not going to play Monopoly with her in this state, but they could play another board game. The guy played cards poorly himself, so they can do without using the ability that speeds up the brain. But it seems that our boy was a real deceiver, because even at cards he played like a real pro. After all, he is unrealistically smart, so it is not surprising. But Carla understood that now she would have to use her brain to the fullest to fight back in the card game. Suddenly, the main character again has strange visions that Carla is again becoming a villain who is going to destroy the planet. This moment was when he played the game for the first time, but he could not believe that such a sweet girl could turn out to be a villain. This lady was absolutely known for being an incredibly difficult boss that no one could pass on the first try. She had many names among the players, but rather everyone called her the boss from Dark Souls. But looking at the girl's face now, he didn't think that she would really become a villain, because in fact she was an incredibly sweet girl who treated him kindly. He couldn't understand what had to happen for her to become evil. After which their incredible rivalry in card games continued, and the boy thought that the girl was really a worthy opponent, because now he does not use his technique, and the girl still fights with him on equal terms. Since she had become a worthy opponent for him, he was very happy about it, but he wasn't going to lose, and that's why he decides to start playing more seriously to remind him who the real boss of the card game is. Of course, after the main character began to play more seriously, the girl simply could not continue playing cards and began to lose. After all, our hero was a real genius of this game. Having lost again, the girl asked the main character to stop being so serious when playing cards because she also wanted to win, but he only said that then there would be no point in the fact that they became rivals. Of course, the girl's face changes because she realized that the boy would not lose to her. Even on the contrary, after his words, he began to play much more seriously than before, and now she definitely had no chance of winning. Fear was clearly visible in her eyes, because the main character was using his strongest tactics. Carla had never met such masters of the game, and thought that she definitely could not defeat the boy. After which he delivers a crushing blow that puts the game's tactics out of action. Now she was in a terrible situation. The main character seemed to read all her tactics in advance, and did not even give her the opportunity to think. After which the main character decides that it would be a great idea to give the girl one last chance to prove herself in a card game. And with this, our video comes to an end. Thank you very much for watching. Please like it so that the new part comes out soon.